The halls of the Habsburg Empire once shimmered with gold power and secrets. From Vienna's grand palaces, rulers governed vast lands, their lives a constant performance for an adoring, or sometimes a whispering public. But beneath the gilded ceilings, shadows lurked. Some stories whispered in the hushed corners of history refused to fade. They are tales of lives that vanished, truths that dissolved, and people who simply disappeared, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. The Habsburg court, for all its splendor, harbored mysteries that defy easy explanation, casting a long, chilling shadow over even the most magnificent reign. Here are 5 such captivating, unsettling stories. Number 5. The Vanishing Act of Archduke Johann Salvator of Austria. Johann Orth. The year was 1889. The Habsburg Empire, for all its pomp and ancient traditions, felt the tremors of a changing world. Emperor Franz Joseph the first sat on the throne, a stern figure of duty, while his Empress Elizabeth, a restless soul, roamed the world, seeking escape from court life. Their son, crowned Prince Rudolf, had just met a tragic, unexplained end at Mayerling. In the midst of this turbulent era, another, even more complete disappearance would captivate Europe, that of Archduke Johann Salvator of Austria. Johann Salvator was born into the heart of this imperial family, a son of Grand Duke Leopold II of Tuscany, a branch of the Habsburgs. From an early age he stood apart. Unlike many of his cousins who embraced military careers with a detached air, Johann Salvator was truly passionate about the Navy. He rose through the ranks, demonstrating genuine talent and a knack for naval engineering. He was intelligent, artistic, and possessed a free spirit that clashed with the rigid formalities of the Viennese court. Reports from those who knew him well described a man who craved authenticity and disliked the suffocating pretense of royal life. He was a naval officer of considerable skill, holding commands and even developing innovative ship designs. But his independent nature often put him at odds with the conservative establishment. He questioned authority, spoke his mind, and was known to express liberal political views, which was highly unusual, even scandalous for a Habsburg archduke. His outspokenness grated on the nerves of Emperor Franz Joseph, who valued strict adherence to protocol and tradition above all else. This tension festered for years. In the late 1880s, Johann Salvator's discontent reached a peak. He had already published a pamphlet, Considerations on the Organization of the Austrian Army, under the pseudonym Johann Orth, which openly criticized military inefficiencies. This act alone was seen as a grave offense against the imperial order. He was deeply affected by the death of his cousin and friend, Crown Prince Rudolf, at Mayerling. Rudolf's mysterious demise, the subsequent official cover-up, and the pervasive atmosphere of secrecy seemed to solidify Johann Salvator's desire to escape the suffocating grip of his royal lineage. He longed for a life unburdened by titles, expectations, and the constant scrutiny of the court. His decision was radical, almost unbelievable for a member of such a powerful dynasty. Johann Salvator resolved to renounce his imperial title, his birthright, and all the privileges that came with being a Habsburg archduke. He sought permission from Emperor Franz Joseph to give up his rank and live as an ordinary citizen. The emperor, infuriated by his maverick behavior and public criticisms, initially refused. However, Johann Salvator persisted. He threatened to simply walk away without permission, causing an even greater scandal. Faced with this ultimatum, and perhaps seeing a way to rid the court of a troublesome figure, Franz Joseph relented. On January 15, 1889, Archduke Johann Salvator officially renounced his name, titles, and all claims to the imperial house. He became simply Johann Orth, a commoner, albeit a very wealthy one. With his new identity, Johann Orth wasted no time in preparing for his new life. He was deeply in love with a woman named Ludmilla Stubel, a dancer from the Vienna Opera. Their relationship, while a scandalous secret for an archduke, was one of true affection and shared aspirations for freedom. Johann had acquired a ship, a three-masted bark named the Santa Margherita, and planned to sail the world with Ludmilla. They married in London shortly after his renunciation, a quiet ceremony, far from the imperial glare. In March 1890, the Santa Margherita set sail from London. Johann Orth, now its captain, and his wife Ludmilla were on board along with a small crew. Their destination was initially Valparaiso, Chile, with plans to explore the Pacific. The journey was long, and reports of their progress were scarce, and came with significant delays, as was common for maritime travel in that era. They stopped in various ports along the way, picking up supplies and sending letters back to Europe. The last confirmed communication from Johann Orth was a letter sent from Buenos Aires, Argentina, dated July 1890. In it, he expressed his happiness and contentment with his new life, far from the suffocating world he had left behind. After leaving Buenos Aires, the Santa Margherita was expected to sail south, navigate the treacherous waters of Cape Horn, and then head north into the Pacific. However, the ship Johann Orth and Ludmilla Stubel were never seen or heard from again. Weeks turned into months, then years. No trace of the Santa Margherita, its crew, or its famous captain and his wife ever surfaced. The initial assumption was that the ship had been lost in a storm while attempting to round Cape Horn, a notoriously dangerous passage, known for its violent weather and unpredictable currents. Maritime records from the period show many ships succumbing to the power of the southern oceans. For the Habsburg court, this explanation, while tragic, was convenient. It provided a definitive end to the embarrassing saga of their runaway Archduke. In 1911, more than 2 decades after his disappearance, Johann Orth was officially declared dead. But a story like this, so full of defiance and a thirst for freedom, was not destined to end with a simple declaration. The mystery of Johann Orth's disappearance fueled a myriad of rumors and theories that persisted for decades. One popular theory suggested that he had indeed survived the shipwreck, or perhaps deliberately faked his death to live out his days in complete anonymity. Stories emerged from South America, Central America, and even North America, claiming sightings of a man who bore a striking resemblance to the vanished Archduke. Some alleged he had settled in Argentina, living a quiet life as a farmer or a fisherman. Others claimed he had adopted a new identity and continued his naval pursuits under a different name, perhaps even commanding other ships. There were tales of a lonely, distinguished European gentleman who appeared in remote towns, speaking with an educated accent and possessing an air of melancholy, who locals believed could only be the former Archduke. These sightings, often vague and unconfirmed, added layers to the mystery. How could a man so determined to escape his past truly vanish without a trace? Could he have pulled off the ultimate disappearing act, not just from the Habsburg court, but from the entire world? Another theory hinted at foul play. Johann Orth had made powerful enemies within the imperial structure, not just with his criticisms, but also with his public renunciation. Was it possible that his disappearance was not an accident of nature, but a deliberate act orchestrated by those who wished him silenced forever? Could agents of the empire or others with a vested interest in his removal have arranged for the Santa Margherita to vanish, ensuring that the last remaining outspoken symbol of dissent within the family was permanently removed? This dark hypothesis suggested a more sinister reason for the complete lack of wreckage or bodies. The financial aspect also played a role in the enduring mystery. Johann Orth was a wealthy man. What happened to his fortune? Did it vanish with him, or was it somehow tied up in his disappearance? The questions surrounding his assets and legacy further complicated the narrative, feeding into the idea that perhaps there was more to his story than a simple shipwreck. For generations, the name Johann Orth remained a symbol of rebellion and an enigma. His life, from the rigid confines of the Habsburg court to the vast open seas, was a quest for freedom. His disappearance, however, was the ultimate expression of that quest, leaving behind only tantalizing questions. Did he find his desired anonymity in a faraway land? Or did the cruel hand of fate or something more sinister simply swallow him whole, ensuring that the rebellious Archduke remained one of the Habsburg court's most enduring unexplained disappearances? The vastness of the ocean holds many secrets, and perhaps the Santa Margherita, with its defiant captain, is one of its most profound. Number 4. The unseen truth of Crown Prince Rudolf of Austria at Mayerling. The morning of January 30th, 1889, dawned cold and bleak. It was a day that would forever be etched in the annals of Habsburg history, marked by a shocking event that sent ripples of grief and speculation across Europe. At the hunting lodge of Mayerling, deep in the Vienna woods, Crown Prince Rudolf of Austria, the only son of Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth, was found dead. Beside him lay the body of his young mistress, Baroness Mary Wetzera. The official story, swiftly and clumsily constructed by the imperial court, was that Rudolf had died of heart failure, an explanation few believed even at the time. The truth of what truly happened that fateful morning and the events leading up to it remains one of the Habsburg court's most profoundly unsettling and unexplained disappearances, not of a person, but of the very truth itself. Rudolf was born in 1858, a long-awaited heir to one of Europe's most powerful dynasties. From his earliest days, his life was meticulously planned, his future destiny as emperor seemingly assured. He was intelligent, curious, and well-educated, embracing liberal ideas and demonstrating a keen interest in science and politics, often clashing with his conservative father. His mother, Empress Elizabeth, a restless and unconventional figure, shared a complicated bond with him, both understanding and distant. Rudolf was married to Princess Stephanie of Belgium, a union that was politically advantageous, but personally strained. Their marriage, while producing a daughter, Archduchess Elizabeth Marie, was not a happy one, and Rudolf's personal life became increasingly entangled with various women, and a growing sense of despair by the late 1880s. He felt stifled by court life, alienated from his father, and frustrated by his inability to influence policy. His health, both physical and mental, was deteriorating. He suffered from various ailments, possibly including syphilis, which was a common affliction of the time, and struggled with depression and anxiety. He had become increasingly reckless, engaging in numerous affairs and developing an interest in morbid subjects, including death and suicide. He had spoken to close friends about taking his own life, and even attempted to find a companion to join him in a suicide pact. It was in this turbulent state that he met Baroness Mary Wetzera, a 17-year-old noblewoman with a romantic, almost obsessive, adoration for the crown prince. Their affair, passionate and reckless, quickly deepened. Mary was captivated by Rudolf, seeing him as a tragic, Byronic figure. Rudolf, in turn, found in her a devoted companion, willing to join him in his dark contemplations. Their relationship was a dangerous secret, known only to a few trusted confidants, including Mary's aunt, Countess Marie Lariche, who would later play a crucial, controversial role in the tragedy. The precise sequence of events leading to Mayerling is obscured by the court's immediate frantic efforts to control the narrative. On January 28th, Rudolf arrived at the Mayerling hunting lodge, seemingly for a hunting trip, accompanied by a few servants and his trusted valet. Mary Wetzera joined him later, smuggled into the lodge under cover of darkness, reportedly, with the assistance of Countess Lariche. Over the next 2 days, the couple remained secluded. The morning of January 30th brought the horrifying discovery. When Rudolf failed to appear for breakfast, his valet and his hunting companion, Count Hoyos, forced their way into his locked bedroom. What they found there sent shockwaves through the imperial family and beyond. Rudolf was lying dead in his bed, a bullet wound to his head. Mary Wetzera was on the bed beside him, also dead, seemingly from a gunshot wound. The immediate reaction of the imperial court was panic and desperate damage control. Suicide, especially for a crown prince, was unthinkable in Catholic Austria. It would have meant Rudolf could not be buried in sacred ground, and it would have brought immense scandal upon the already fragile dynasty. Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth were plunged into unimaginable grief, compounded by the desperate need to fabricate an acceptable public story. within hours. An official statement was released claiming Rudolf had died of a heart attack. This was quickly amended to a stroke. Then, as rumors spread like wildfire, a more elaborate, though still carefully constructed narrative emerged. Rudolf had gone mad in the night, first shooting Mary Vetsera in a fit of derangement, and then turning the gun on himself. This version, while admitting to suicide, still painted him as a victim of sudden illness, preserving some semblance of honor. Mary Vetsera's body was hastily removed from Mayerling, dressed and propped up in a carriage to appear as though she were alive before being secretly buried in the local cemetery. Her involvement was minimized, her reputation quietly ruined. The scene at Mayerling was quickly hid. Evidence was removed. Witnesses were intimidated or sworn to secrecy, and a tight lid was placed on any dissenting voices. Those who were present at the lodge that morning, including the valet, the doctor, and the close confidants, were subjected to intense scrutiny and pressure to conform to the official narrative. Their testimonies, recorded and controlled by the court, often contradicted each other, fueling skepticism among the public and future historians, despite the court's best efforts. Questions persisted. The complete lack of transparency and the deliberate suppression of facts turned Mayerling into one of history's great unsolved puzzles. One popular theory, supported by some contemporary accounts and later analyses, suggests a double suicide pact. Rudolf, overwhelmed by his despair and possibly ill health, chose to end his life, and Mary, devoted to him, agreed to join him. This theory aligns with Rudolf's known suicidal ideation and Mary's intense infatuation. It paints a picture of two desperate lovers making a tragic conscious choice. However, other theories emerged, hinting at a more sinister plot. Some whispered of a political assassination. Rudolf's liberal views, his opposition to his father's conservative policies, and his supposed involvement in plots against the government made him a target for powerful enemies. Could Mayerling have been a meticulously planned murder, disguised as a suicide to avoid a political explosion? This theory suggests that Rudolf and Mary were both killed by unseen forces, perhaps by agents of the state or foreign powers, who then staged the scene to appear as a suicide. The swiftness of the cover-up, the suppression of evidence, and the intimidation of witnesses provided fertile ground for such suspicions. There was also the possibility of an accident. Could Rudolf have accidentally shot Mary during an argument or struggle, and then in a fit of remorse or despair, taken his own life? This theory acknowledges the intimate nature of the situation, but still leaves room for tragic mischance. The specific details of the gunshots, the positions of the bodies and the physical evidence, or lack thereof, were never fully or transparently investigated by an impartial authority, leaving all possibilities open to debate. Accounts from Mary Vetsera's family, particularly her mother, who was desperate to clear her daughter's name, offered differing perspectives. Documents were sealed, then briefly unsealed, only to raise more questions. Autopsy reports, if they existed in detail, were never fully released. The Mayerling incident became a historical black hole, swallowing the truth and leaving behind only speculation and sorrow. The disappearance of the truth at Mayerling had profound consequences for the Habsburg Empire. It shattered the imperial family, plunging them into a deep and lasting grief. Empress Elizabeth never truly recovered, retreating further into her reclusive world. Emperor Franz Joseph, already a stoic figure, became even more rigid and isolated. The death of Rudolf meant a change in the line of succession, ultimately leading to Archduke Franz Ferdinand, becoming the heir whose own assassination in 1914 would plunge Europe into the First World War and bring about the final collapse. The Mayerling tragedy stands as a stark reminder of how quickly truth can vanish when powerful forces conspire to control a narrative. The precise events of that cold January morning remain lost to history, swallowed by silence and obscured by deliberate deception. The lives of Rudolf and Mary Vetsera vanished in a blaze of secrecy, leaving behind a haunting mystery that continues to captivate and puzzle historians and enthusiast. The ultimate disappearance at Mayerling was not just of 2 lives, but of the unvarnished facts, leaving only theories in their wake. Number 3. The swift vanishing of Ladislaus the Posthumous. In the mid-15th century, the Habsburg dynasty was consolidating its power, laying the foundations for its future dominance in Central Europe. The court was a place of intricate political maneuvering, dynastic marriages, and often sudden, unexpected turns of fate. One such fate befell a young king whose life was as fleeting as a whisper, leaving behind a chilling mystery that echoed through the centuries. This was Ladislaus, the posthumous king of Bohemia and Hungary, and Archduke of Austria, whose life vanished abruptly, the true cause of his demise remaining unexplained. Ladislaus was born on February 22, 1440, in Komárom, Hungary. His birth was bittersweet, occurring 4 months after the death of his father, Albert II of Germany, who was also King of Bohemia, Hungary, and Archduke of Austria. This unique circumstance gave Ladislaus his poignant epithet, the Posthumous. His birth sparked immediate succession crises in both Bohemia and Hungary, as powerful noble factions vied for control, creating a turbulent childhood for the young monarch. He was recognized by most as the rightful heir to the Habsburg lands and to the crowns of Bohemia and Hungary. However, his youth meant that regents and powerful magnates effectively ruled in his name, often clashing violently over influence and control. From the very beginning, Ladislaus's life was entwined with political intrigue. As an infant, he was spirited away to Vienna by his mother, Elizabeth of Bohemia. To ensure his safety and secure his claim against rivals, he spent his early years under the guardianship of his cousin, Emperor Frederick III, a complex figure who was both his protector and, arguably, a manipulative guardian, who sought to maintain control over Ladislaus's vast inheritance. Accounts from chroniclers of the time describe a boy who grew into a promising young man, educated and seemingly destined to finally assert his authority over his turbulent kingdoms. He was reaching the age of majority, a moment that held immense significance for the stability of his realms. By the mid-1450s, as Ladislaus approached adulthood, the various factions in Bohemia and Hungary recognized that his personal rule was imminent. In Bohemia, George of Podobrady, a powerful Hussite nobleman, acted as regent. In Hungary, John Hunyadi, a celebrated military commander, served a similar role. Both men had consolidated significant power during Ladislaus's minority, and the prospect of the young king taking the reins of government created both anticipation and apprehension among the nobility. He was seen as a potential unifying force, but also a threat to those who had grown accustomed to exercising power in his stead. In 1457, Ladislaus was in Prague preparing for his impending marriage to Magdalena of Valois, a daughter of King Charles VII of France. This marriage was a significant political alliance, intended to cement his position and bring stability to his realms. The court was abuzz with preparations for the grand wedding, and the young king's assumption of full power. It was a moment of immense political consequence, a potential turning point for the future of Central Europe. But fate, or something more sinister, intervened. On November 23, 1457, at the age of just 17, Ladislaus the Posthumous suddenly fell ill. His symptoms were severe: fever, intense, body pains and swelling. Within a matter of days, on November 23rd, he was dead. The swiftness of his decline and death shocked the court and sent waves of alarm across Europe. One moment, he was a vibrant, youthful monarch on the cusp of fulfilling his destiny. The next, his life had completely vanished. The official cause of death, as declared by the court physicians of the time, was often attributed to plague or a virulent epidemic, which were common scourges in the 15th century. Given the prevalence of such diseases, this explanation was plausible on the surface. However, the suddenness of his death, combined with the immense political stakes surrounding his life, immediately fueled whispers and suspicions that went beyond natural causes. The disappearance of Ladislaus's life at such a critical juncture inevitably led to a swirl of theories, none of which could be definitively proven, but all of which contributed to the lasting mystery. One prominent theory which gained traction even at the time was poisoning. Ladislaus had many enemies, or at least powerful figures, who stood to benefit greatly from his untimely demise. George of Podebrady, the powerful regent in Bohemia, was certainly one who benefited. With Ladislaus's death, the Bohemian throne became vacant, paving the way for Podebrady's own election as King of Bohemia in 1458. This rapid rise to power immediately cast a shadow of suspicion over him. Did Podebrady, eager to secure his own position and prevent Ladislaus from asserting royal authority, orchestrate the young king's death? Accounts from rival factions certainly suggested this possibility, though no direct evidence ever surfaced. Similarly, in Hungary, the Hunyadi family had been in a tense relationship with Ladislaus. Ladislaus had ordered the execution of Ladislaus Hunyadi, John Hunyadi's son, earlier in 1457, a move that created immense animosity. Could members of the Hunyadi family seeking revenge or to secure their own influence have been behind the king's death? The political climate was ripe with such treachery. Another theory suggested that the poisoning was not necessarily intentional murder, but perhaps a mistake or an accident. In a time when poisons were used for various purposes, including medicine, could an accidental overdose or a botched attempt at treatment have led to his death? However, the precision and swiftness of his decline seemed to argue against a simple medical error. The lack of sophisticated forensic methods in the 15th century meant that a definitive answer was impossible to obtain at the time. The body was interred, and the immediate political upheaval took precedence over a thorough impartial investigation into the cause of death. The official narrative, whatever version was most palatable at the time, was swiftly adopted. But the undercurrent of doubt never truly dissipated. Centuries later, in 1985, modern science finally offered a glimmer of insight into this ancient mystery. Ladislaus's remains, interred in St. Vitus Cathedral in Prague, were exhumed and subjected to extensive forensic examination. This was a rare opportunity to apply modern medical knowledge to a centuries-old puzzle. The results of the examination were remarkable. Scientists discovered high concentrations of lead in Ladislaus's bones. This finding strongly suggested that he had suffered from acute lead poisoning. However, even with this significant discovery, the ultimate question of whether the poisoning was accidental or deliberate remains unanswered. Lead poisoning was not uncommon in the Middle Ages. Lead was present in many everyday items, in cosmetics, in glazes for pottery, in some wines and beverages that were sweetened with lead acetate, and even in certain medicines. It was possible that Ladislaus had unknowingly consumed lead over a period of time, or that a sudden large dose had been administered inadvertently. But the deliberate poisoning theory gained new credence. Given the political climate, the intense rivalry, and the clear beneficiaries of his death, the lead could very well have been administered with malicious intent. Without knowing the exact source or the precise amount and timing of the lead exposure, the mystery persists. Was it a calculated act of murder to remove a young king who stood in the way of powerful ambitions? Or was it a tragic, though accidental, consequence of living in a time ignorant of toxic substances? Ladislaus, the posthumous, remains a poignant figure in Habsburg history. His life, so full of potential and dynastic importance, vanished in a mere 17 years under a cloud of suspicion. His death fundamentally altered the course of Central European history, leading to new rulers in Bohemia and Hungary, and strengthening the position of Emperor Frederick III in Austria. The true circumstances of his sudden demise, the unexplained vanishing of his young life, continues to be debated. A silent testimony to the dark undercurrents of power and ambition that often shadowed even the most illustrious royal courts. Number 2. The eclipsing of Countess Marie Leriche. The glittering facade of the Habsburg court often concealed a complex web of familial loyalties, hidden resentments, and dangerous secrets. One figure caught directly in the tragic vortex of the Mayerling incident found her own life transformed into a kind of public disappearance. Countess Marie Lariche, niece of the enigmatic Empress Elizabeth, was once a prominent, well-connected member of the imperial circle. But after the devastating events of January 1889, her reputation vanished, her credibility was destroyed, and she was cast out from Sessard by scandal and hardship. Her truth, or at least the accepted version of it, seemed to vanish, leaving behind only her contested accounts and a life reshaped by the court's unforgiving judgment. Marie-Louise Elizabeth Mendel, born in 1858, was the daughter of Ludwig Wilhelm, Duke in Bavaria, Empress Elizabeth's eccentric brother, and actress Henriette Mendel. Her parents' morganatic marriage, a union between a royal and a commoner, meant that Marie herself was not a princess, but a countess. Despite this, her close kinship to the Empress secured her a place within the extended imperial family. She spent much of her childhood in the bohemian atmosphere of her parents' home, but she also spent time at court, where she was exposed to the rigid protocols and expectations of Habsburg life. Marie was intelligent, ambitious, and, like her famous aunt, possessed a restless spirit. In 1877, she married Count Georg Lariche von Moenich, a wealthy Austrian nobleman, which cemented her position within high society. She became known for her charm, her social connections, and her vivacious personality. She was a favored companion of Empress Elizabeth, who often found court life stifling and preferred the company of those who understood her unconventional nature. Marie became one of the Empress's trusted ladies-in-waiting, accompanying her on trips and serving as a confidant. This privileged position gave her unique access to the inner workings of the imperial family, including the increasingly troubled life of Crown Prince Rudolf. Rudolf, caught between his liberal ideals and the conservative expectations of his father, found a sympathetic ear in Marie Lariche. She understood the pressures of the court and the complexities of his personal life. It was through this connection that Marie became an unwitting, or perhaps knowing, facilitator of Rudolf's clandestine affair with Baroness Mary Wetzera. Mary was a young, impetuous noblewoman, deeply infatuated with the crown prince. Marie Lariche, perhaps out of loyalty to Rudolf, or a misguided sense of romantic adventure, or even a desire for increased influence, helped arrange secret meetings between the lovers. She often chaperoned Mary to clandestine rendezvous, even accompanying her to Mayerling in the days leading up to the tragedy. The precise extent of Marie Lariche's involvement at Mayerling and her knowledge of Rudolf's and Mary's intentions became a central point of contention after the bodies were discovered. On that devastating morning of January 30th, 1889, when the Crown Prince and Mary Wetzera were found dead, the imperial court immediately sought to control the narrative and suppress any information that might tarnish the Habsburg name. Those involved, or even remotely connected, were subjected to intense scrutiny and pressure. Marie Lariche, as the key intermediary in Rudolf and Mary's affair, found herself at the epicenter of the scandal. She was interrogated by court officials and members of the imperial family, including Emperor Franz Joseph himself. Her initial accounts were confused and contradictory, a mix of genuine shock, fear, and a desperate attempt to protect herself, and perhaps the reputations of others. The court, eager to find a scapegoat and to deflect blame from the imperial family, swiftly pinned much of the responsibility for the affair and its tragic outcome onto Marie. She was accused of gross negligence, of facilitating a dangerous liaison, and of failing to prevent the tragedy. Her once close relationship with Empress Elizabeth shattered. The Empress, devastated by Rudolf's death, reportedly blamed Marie for her complicity and cut her off completely. Countess Lariche was effectively ostracized from the imperial court and from high society. Her prominent position vanished, replaced by public scorn and whispers of disgrace. The official narrative painted her as a disreputable figure, a morally bankrupt woman who had led the crown prince astray. This judgment, swift and absolute, effectively ensured her social disappearance. She was no longer invited to court functions, Her friends distanced themselves, and her husband, Count Larisch, eventually divorced her in 1896. Stripped of her social standing, her marriage, and her imperial connections, Marie Larisch's life took a precipitous downward turn. She struggled financially despite her noble background. To make ends meet, and perhaps to clear her name, she began to write. In 1913, she published her memoirs, My Past, which offered her version of events surrounding Mayerling and her life at court. However, her memoirs, rather than rehabilitating her reputation, further complicated her legacy. They were often inconsistent with other accounts, and their accuracy was heavily questioned by historians and surviving members of the imperial family. Some saw them as a desperate attempt to profit from tragedy, others as a genuine, if flawed, effort to tell her side of the story. The court and many historians dismissed her claims, further eroding her credibility. The truth she claimed to hold about Rudolf's intentions, or the full extent of the court's cover-up, was met with skepticism and often outright rejection. Her narrative, like her social standing, largely vanished from acceptance. Marie Larisch remarried several times, each marriage bringing its own set of problems and further financial distress. She dabbled in various ventures trying to support herself, but success eluded her. She moved between different countries, living a nomadic and often impoverished existence, a stark contrast to her former life of privilege. She tried acting, selling stories to newspapers, and even working as a cleaning lady in a foreign country. The woman who once walked the glittering halls of the Habsburg now lived in obscurity and hardship. Her final years were marked by isolation and poverty. She died in 1940 in Augsburg, Germany, at the age of 81. Largely forgotten by the public that had once scrutinized her every move, her personal truth, the full extent of her knowledge of Mayerling, and the true motivations behind her actions remained elusive. Was she a manipulative schemer, a naive pawn in a dangerous game, a tragic victim of circumstance and court politics? Her story, stripped of its original prominence, became a testament to how reputation and credibility can vanish under the weight of scandal and imperial power. Countess Marie Larisch's life, after Mayerling, became a protracted disappearance from grace, from social acceptance, and from the privileged identity she once held. Her truth, too, vanished, subsumed by the official narratives and public condemnation, leaving behind a haunting question about the true cost of imperial secrets and the fate of those who become entangled in them. Number 1. The brief life and quiet vanishing of Archduchess Sophie of Austria. The Habsburg court, for all its grandiosity and power, was also a place of profound personal tragedy. Beneath the glittering surface, families grappled with illness, loss, and the ever-present specter of mortality. One such poignant story involves the eldest child of Emperor Franz Joseph I and Empress Elizabeth, Archduchess Sophie of Austria. Her life was brief, her death sudden, and while officially attributed to natural causes, the precise circumstances of her rapid decline and the deeper emotional void it created leave lingering questions about a vanishing life. Sophie was born on March 5, 1855, just over 7 months after her parents' grand imperial wedding. She was the first child of the young Emperor Franz Joseph, a man burdened by the weight of an ancient empire, and his beautiful-spirited Empress Elizabeth, who, at just 17 years old, was finding court life overwhelmingly restrictive. Sophie's birth was met with immense joy and expectation, representing the continuation of the Habsburg line. She was officially christened Sophie Friederike Dorothea Maria Josepha, carrying the names of several powerful female figures in her lineage. From the moment of her birth, Sophie was a source of tension within the imperial family. Her grandmother, Archduchess Sophie Franz, Joseph's formidable mother, immediately asserted her authority over the upbringing of the imperial children. She believed that Elizabeth, being too young and perceived as too flighty, was incapable of raising the future generation of Habsburgs. As a result, baby Sophie was largely separated from her mother and placed under the strict care of her grandmother, a practice common in royal courts, but particularly agonizing for Elizabeth, who craved a more intimate connection with her children. Accounts from the time indicate that Elizabeth struggled deeply with this arrangement. Feeling alienated from her own daughter, despite the parental struggles, Sophie was described by those around her as a bright, lively, and engaging child. She was seen as a future empress, destined to play a significant role in the dynasty. She was barely 2 years old, a toddler full of the promise of youth when tragedy struck. In April 1857, Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth embarked on a diplomatic tour of their Hungarian territories, bringing their 2 young daughters, Sophie and her younger sister Gisela, who was then just 10 months old. This decision for Elizabeth was a rare opportunity to have her children with her, away from the constant oversight of Archduchess Sophie. The journey was meant to foster goodwill and cement the Habsburg presence in Hungary, a region always on the cusp of rebellion. During their stay in Budapest, the unexpected happened. Both Sophie and Gisela fell ill. The symptoms were severe: high fever, vomiting, and diarrhea. In the 19th century, before the advent of modern medicine and a clear understanding of germ theory, such illnesses were often fatal, especially for young children. Royal physicians, despite their best efforts, were often limited in what they could do beyond providing comfort. Gisela, the younger child, recovered after a few days, though her condition was serious. But Sophie's condition worsened rapidly. The official medical reports from the court physicians diagnosed her illness as typhus, a highly contagious and often deadly bacterial infection, common in crowded urban areas and during periods of poor sanitation. The disease was known to spread quickly and could claim lives with terrifying speed. On May 29, 1857, after suffering for only a few days, Archduchess Sophie passed away. The suddenness of her death, the rapidity with which her young life vanished, plunged her parents into a profound and enduring grief. For Elizabeth, it was a particularly devastating blow, intensifying her feelings of inadequacy and her alienation from court life. The loss of her firstborn and the first child she was able to truly bond with away left an indelible mother-in-law, left an indelible mark on her psyche, contributing to her lifelong melancholic nature. While the official diagnosis of typhus was accepted by the court and public, the precise circumstances and the suddenness of Sophie's demise have, over time, led to quiet questions and lingering uncertainties. In an era without advanced diagnostic tools, misdiagnosis was not uncommon. Could it have been another virulent infection? Perhaps cholera, which also caused rapid onset of severe gastrointestinal symptoms? Or was it something else entirely? Some historians and biographers have subtly hinted at the possibilities of food poisoning or other environmental factors, given the conditions of travel and lodging in the mid-19th century. Was there a deficiency in the sanitation of their surroundings? In Budapest, were the children exposed to contaminated food or water? Without modern investigations, such possibilities remain unconfirmed, but they contribute to the sense of a life that simply ceased, without a clear, fully transparent explanation beyond the broad term of an epidemic disease. The impact of Sophie's death on the imperial family was immense and long-lasting. For Franz Joseph, it was his first profound personal loss as emperor, adding to the burden of his imperial duties. For Elizabeth, the tragedy confirmed her deep-seated anxieties and her sense of powerlessness within the court. She became even more detached from her surviving children, particularly Gisela, fearing another loss and unable to form strong attachments. Her subsequent pregnancies, including that of Crown Prince Rudolf, were shadowed by the memory of Sophie, contributing to her later famously restless and melancholic disposition. The brief life of Archduchess Sophie remains a poignant, if lesser-known, mystery within the broader tapestry of Habsburg history. Her life, full of potential, vanished before it could truly begin, leaving behind a legacy of grief and a quiet question about the exact forces that claimed her. Her story is a reminder that even within the most powerful and seemingly immutable dynasties, fate can intervene with terrifying swiftness, leaving behind an unexplained void and the quiet sadness of what might have been. The silent vanishing of her 2-year-old life, though explained by the limited science of the time, still holds a subtle, unsettling question mark over the true, unexamined reasons behind the loss of such a young royal